My grandson threw away my life's work like it was garbage, not knowing that a single coin in that collection was worth more than his entire apartment building. I'm James Anderson, 65 years old, and I've lived in the same modest two-bedroom house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, for the past 37 years. My neighbors know me as the quiet widower who tends his garden religiously every morning and collects coins. What they don't know is that my seemingly innocent hobby had become something extraordinary over the decades. It was a Tuesday morning in October when I discovered what my grandson Tyler had done. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves as I shuffled to my basement office, my arthritic knees protesting with each step down the wooden stairs. This basement wasn't much to look at. Concrete walls painted white years ago, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, and my old oak desk pushed against the far wall. But it was my sanctuary, the place where I'd spent countless hours cataloging, researching, and carefully preserving coins from around the world. The moment I reached the bottom step, I knew something was terribly wrong. The air felt different, emptier somehow. My desk, which had always been meticulously organized with coin albums, reference books, and my magnifying glass, sat bare except for a few scattered papers. My heart began to race as I stumbled forward, my hands trembling as they searched the empty drawers. "No, no, no," I whispered, my voice cracking in the silence. 43 years of collecting, gone. I had started collecting coins when I was 22, just married to my beloved Sarah. Back then, it was just pocket change that seemed interesting. Wheat pennies, silver quarters, the occasional buffalo nickel. Sarah used to tease me about my treasure hunting, but she always supported my passion. When she passed away 5 years ago from cancer, those coins became more than just metal and history. They were my connection to every moment we'd shared, every anniversary trip where we'd hunt through antique shops and coin dealers, every birthday when she'd surprise me with a rare find she'd discovered online. My legs gave out, and I collapsed into the old wooden chair behind my desk. The basement suddenly felt like a tomb, cold and suffocating. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they came anyway, hot, angry tears that I hadn't shed since Sarah's funeral. That's when I heard footsteps upstairs, heavy, familiar footsteps that I recognized immediately. Tyler, my 26-year-old grandson, had been staying with me for the past 3 months after losing his job at the insurance company downtown. I'd welcomed him with open arms, grateful for the company and hoping to rebuild the relationship that had grown distant over the years. Tyler had always been Sarah's favorite, a charming kid with sandy brown hair and an easy smile that could melt your heart. But somewhere along the way, that charm had turned into entitlement, and that smile had become a mask for something I was only beginning to understand. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like I was walking to my own execution. Tyler was in the kitchen, standing by the coffee maker with his back to me. He was tall and lean, wearing one of those expensive hoodies that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. His brown hair was perfectly styled, and I could see the glow of his phone screen reflecting off the stainless steel refrigerator. "Tyler," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned around, and for a split second, I saw something flash across his face. Guilt, maybe, or fear, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Hey, Grandpa Jim," he said, his voice overly casual. "You're up early. Want some coffee?" I stared at him. This young man I'd held as a baby, whose diapers I'd changed when his parents were working double shifts, whose soccer games I'd never missed, even when my back was killing me. The morning light streaming through the kitchen window illuminated his face, and I could see Sarah's eyes staring back at me, the same green eyes that had looked at me with such love for 38 years. "Where are my coins, Tyler?" The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. Tyler's hand froze on the coffee pot handle, and I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. "What coins, Grandpa?" The lie hit me like a physical blow. This was my grandson, my own blood, and he was looking me straight in the eye and lying to me. "Don't," my voice was stronger now, fueled by a rage I didn't know I still possessed. "Don't you dare lie to me. 43 years of collecting, Tyler. 43 years. Where are they?" His shoulders sagged, and suddenly he looked like the scared little boy who used to hide behind Sarah's skirt when he'd broken something. But this wasn't a broken vase or a spilled glass of milk. This was my life's work, my memories, my connection to the woman I'd loved more than my own life. "I thought they were just old coins, Grandpa." You never said they were worth anything. Worth anything. I could barely control my voice. I told you stories about every single coin in that collection. I showed you the 1916 Mercury dime I found at an estate sale in Des Moines. I told you about the Indian head pennies your grandmother and I collected during our honeymoon road trip. You sat in that basement with me dozens of times. Tyler's face had gone pale, and his hands were shaking as he set down the coffee pot. I needed money. Okay, my credit cards are maxed out, and my student loans. I'm drowning, Grandpa. I thought maybe you had some valuable coins, but I didn't know ... Where are they? The words came out like bullets, sharp and precise. I sold them to a pawn shop on First Avenue, Mike's Pawn and Gold. But Grandpa, they only gave me $300 for the whole collection. The guy said most of them weren't worth much, just a bunch of old pennies and nickels. $300 for 43 years of my life. I felt something break inside me, something that had been holding me together since Sarah died. The kitchen began to spin, and I had to grab the counter to keep from falling. Tyler reached out to steady me, but I jerked away from his touch. Get out. Grandpa, please, ... Get out of my house. My voice echoed through the small kitchen, bouncing off the yellow walls that Sarah had painted the year before she got sick. Tyler's face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I'm sorry, he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. I'm so sorry, Grandpa Jim. I didn't know. But sorry wasn't going to bring back my coins. Sorry wasn't going to restore the 1893 S. Morgan silver dollar that Sarah had saved up for 6 months to buy me for our 10th anniversary. Sorry wasn't going to undo the fact that my own grandson had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I turned my back on him and walked to the living room, sinking into Sarah's old recliner. Behind me, I heard Tyler gathering his things, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floors. The front door opened and closed with a soft click, and then I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. The house felt different without Tyler's presence, emptier, but somehow cleaner too, as if his betrayal had been a poison that was finally being expelled. I sat in that chair for hours, staring at the framed photograph on the coffee table, Sarah and me on our 35th wedding anniversary. Both of us, gray and wrinkled, but still holding hands like teenagers. What am I supposed to do now, honey? I whispered to her picture, but Sarah didn't answer. Sarah would never answer again. As the day wore on, my shock began to transform into something else, determination. Tyler might have stolen my collection, but he hadn't stolen my knowledge. I knew coins, knew their history and their value better than most professional dealers. And if there was even a chance that some of my more valuable pieces were still at that pawn shop, I had to try to get them back. That evening, I called Mike's Pawn and Gold. Yeah, we bought some coins from a young guy today. The gravelly voice on the other end confirmed. Nothing too special, mostly common dates. We gave him $300 for the lot. My heart sank. If they'd already melted them down or sold them off individually, there might be nothing left to recover. But I had to see for myself. Are they still there? I'd like to take a look. Sure, old timer. We're open till 8 tonight, 10 tomorrow. Come on down. I spent that night, wide awake, pacing the floors of my empty house, running through every coin in my collection from memory. The common ones, wheat pennies, buffalo nickels, silver quarters, those were painful losses, but they could be replaced with time and money. But there were others, special ones that Tyler couldn't have known about, that made my hands shake just thinking about them. The 1916 D. Mercury dime, one of only 264,000 ever minted. The 1909's VDB Lincoln cent, the holy grail for penny collectors and the crown jewel of my collection. A coin I'd never shown to anyone, not even Sarah. A coin I'd discovered at an estate sale 15 years ago, tucked away in a cigar box with a bunch of common coins. The seller had no idea what he had, and I'd paid $50 for the entire box. A 1933 Double Eagle gold coin, one of only 13 known to exist in private collections. The last one that sold at auction went for over $18 million. I had never told anyone about that coin, not even my insurance company. It lived in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. But I kept detailed photographs and documentation in my desk drawer. Documentation that Tyler would have thrown away along with everything else. As dawn broke over Cedar Rapids, I was already dressed and ready. Mike's Pawn and Gold opened at 9, and I was going to be their first customer. whether I found my coins or not. This was just the beginning of my fight to reclaim what was mine. I had no idea that this betrayal, as devastating as it was, would lead me to a discovery that would change not just my life, but the entire numismatic world. The truth about what Tyler had done was even worse than I imagined, and what I was about to learn would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew about my own family. Before I continue with this story, I want to ask you to do me a favor. If this story is touching your heart the way it's touching mine to tell it, please hit that like button below and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me share more stories like this one. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please leave your city in the comments below. Now, let me tell you what happened when I walked into that pawn shop. Mike's Pawn and Gold sat on First Avenue like a fortress of broken dreams, its windows barred and covered with faded signs advertising "We buy gold" and cash loans, no credit check. The building was old brick, probably from the 1940s, with paint peeling around the edges and a neon sign that flickered intermittently. I'd driven past this place hundreds of times over the years, never imagining I'd one day be walking through its doors as a desperate old man trying to recover his life's work. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, and the smell hit me immediately, a mixture of cigarettes, old leather, and that distinctive musty odor that seems to cling to places where people's treasures come to die. The shop was cramped, every available inch packed with items that told stories of financial desperation: wedding rings, guitars, power tools, electronics, and jewelry cases filled with watches that would never again mark important moments in their owners' lives. Behind the counter stood a man I assumed was Mike, mid-50s, thick around the middle, with graying hair slicked back and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He was examining what looked like a diamond ring through a jeweler's loupe, his weathered hands surprisingly gentle as he handled the delicate piece. "You, the guy who called about the coins?" he asked without looking up. "That's me, James Anderson." Mike set down the ring and studied me with the practiced eye of someone who'd been in this business long enough to size up every customer within seconds. I could see him taking in my pressed khaki pants, my button-down shirt that Sarah had bought me 3 Christmases ago, and the way my hands trembled slightly as I approached the counter. "Look, Mr. Anderson, I got to be honest with you. The kid who brought these in seemed pretty desperate. Said they belonged to his grandfather who'd passed away." Mike paused, watching my reaction carefully. "You're not dead, I'm guessing." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Tyler hadn't just stolen from me, he'd told this man I was dead. My own grandson had erased me from existence to make his theft easier. "No," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm very much alive. Those coins were stolen from me by my grandson." Mike's expression softened slightly, but I could see the wariness there too. This wasn't his first encounter with family drama, and he'd learned to protect himself from getting caught in the middle of other people's messes. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Anderson, but I run a legitimate business here." The kid had ID, said the coins were his to sell. I gave him a fair price for what he brought in. "Can I see them, please?" Mike hesitated for a moment, then nodded toward a glass case near the back of the store. "Most of them are over there. I've already started sorting through them, pricing the better ones individually." My legs felt weak as I followed him across the cluttered shop. There, spread across 3 shelves in the case, were the scattered remains of my life's passion: wheat pennies from the 1940s and 50s that I'd collected as a young man, silver quarters and dimes that Sarah and I had found during our weekend trips to antique malls, Indian head pennies that had taken me years to acquire in decent condition. But as I scanned the collection, my heart began to race for a different reason. These were my coins, yes, but they represented only a fraction of what I'd lost. The truly valuable pieces, the ones that Tyler couldn't have known about, were nowhere to be seen. "Is this everything?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mike nodded. "That's the whole lot, minus a few common date wheats I've already sold." Like I told the kid, nothing too exciting, mostly collector coins, but nothing rare enough to command premium prices. Relief flooded through me so suddenly that I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. Tyler, in his ignorance and desperation, had grabbed the obvious albums from my desk, the ones I kept out for easy reference and casual browsing. But the truly valuable coins, the ones I kept in specialized holders and safety deposit boxes, had been stored elsewhere. The 1916D Mercury dime was safe in my safety deposit box. The 1909 SVDB Lincoln cent was safe in my safety deposit box. And the 1933 Double Eagle, that was also secure in the bank. But even as relief washed over me, anger began to build again. These coins in the case might not have been worth millions, but they were worth something. More importantly, they were mine. Each one held memories, stories, connections to the life Sarah and I had built together. What would it cost to buy them back? I asked. Mike looked uncomfortable. Well, I paid the kid $300. I'd have to ask for at least $452. Make it worth my while. Plus tax. $450. It was money I couldn't easily spare on my fixed income. But these coins belonged to me. They were stolen property, even if Mike didn't know it at the time. I'll take them, I said without hesitation, as Mike began carefully removing the coins from the case, wrapping each one in tissue paper. I found myself studying his face. There was something in his expression, a thoughtfulness that seemed at odds with his gruff exterior. You know, he said as he worked, there was something strange about that kid. He seemed nervous, kept looking over his shoulder like he expected someone to come after him, and he was in such a hurry to get out of here that he left some stuff behind. My heart skipped. What kind of stuff? Mike reached under the counter and pulled out a small cardboard box, the kind used for storing coins. This was in the bag with everything else, but it was empty except for some old papers and what looked like certificates or something. I was going to throw it away, but ... He shrugged. Seemed like the kind of thing someone might want back. My hands were shaking as he passed me the box. Inside were documents I recognized immediately, authenticity certificates, grading reports, and purchase receipts for some of my more valuable coins. But at the bottom of the box, tucked beneath, a stack of old Coin World magazines, was something that made my blood run cold. A photograph. It was a picture I'd taken 15 years ago of the 1933 Double Eagle, along with the documentation proving its authenticity. The photo was crisp and clear, showing every detail of the coin that was worth more than most people's houses. Written on the back in my own handwriting were the words, "Estate sale, find Davenport, Iowa, 2008, authentication pending." Tyler had seen this photograph. He'd held it in his hands when he rifled through my desk, stealing everything he thought might have value. Which meant, ... Mike, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Did Tyler ask you about any specific coins? Did he mention anything about gold coins, or rare pieces you might be interested in? Mike's expression grew thoughtful. Funny you should ask. He did mention something about his grandfather having some really valuable coins hidden somewhere. Said if he could find them, he'd bring them in for appraisal. He paused, studying my face. Why? Is there something I should know about? The realization hit me like a freight train. Tyler hadn't just stolen my collection and lied about me being dead. He'd seen the photograph of the Double Eagle, and now he was actively hunting for it. My own grandson was plotting to steal the most valuable coin in existence, a coin that could set him up for life. But Tyler didn't know about the safety deposit box. He didn't know that the coin was secure in a vault at First National Bank. What he did know was that I kept detailed records of everything, and those records would lead him straight to the bank. I needed to get home fast. I have to go, I said, pulling out my wallet with trembling fingers. How much do I owe you for the coins? $450 plus tax comes to, let's call it $480. I counted out the bills. My social security check already stretched thin for the month, but I didn't care. As Mike finished wrapping the coins and placed them in a bag, I found myself looking at him with new respect. He could have easily disposed of the box with my documents, but he'd saved them. He could have insisted on full retail price for the coins, but he'd been fair. Mike, I said, as he handed me the bag, thank you for saving the papers, for being honest about the price. You didn't have to do any of that. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since I'd walked in. My dad collected stamps, he said. I know what it's like to lose something that means more than its dollar value. As I drove home through the familiar streets of Cedar Rapids, my mind raced with the implications of what I'd discovered. Tyler knew about the Double Eagle, which meant I was no longer just dealing with a desperate young man who'd made a terrible mistake. I was dealing with someone who was actively plotting to steal an $80 million coin. The question was, how far would he go to get it? I was about to find out that the answer was further than I ever could have imagined. and the betrayal I'd already experienced was nothing compared to what was coming next. When I pulled into my driveway 20 minutes later, I knew immediately that something was wrong. The front door was standing slightly ajar, and my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was peeking through her curtains with the worried expression of someone who'd seen too much. I sat in my car for a moment, my heart pounding against my ribs. Tyler had a key. I'd given it to him when he moved in 3 months ago, but this felt different. This felt deliberate. The house was silent as I stepped inside, but it was the wrong kind of silent. It was the silence of a place that had been violated, searched, turned upside down by desperate hands. My living room looked like a tornado had swept through it. Couch cushions were thrown on the floor, my desk drawers hung open like gaping mouths, and papers were scattered everywhere. But it was what I found in the basement that made my blood run cold. My old oak desk had been completely destroyed. Not just searched, destroyed. The drawers had been ripped out entirely, their contents dumped in piles across the concrete floor. My reference books lay scattered and torn, their pages fluttering in the breeze from the open window Tyler had apparently used to break in. And there, in the center of the chaos, was a crowbar. Tyler hadn't just come back to steal more coins. He'd come back to find information about the Double Eagle, and when he couldn't find what he was looking for in the obvious places, he'd torn my sanctuary apart board by board. I picked up the crowbar with shaking hands, its weight cold and unfamiliar. This wasn't the impulsive act of a desperate young man anymore. This was calculated, violent. This was the action of someone who'd crossed a line there was no coming back from, looking for something specific. I spun around, nearly dropping the crowbar. Tyler stood at the bottom of the basement stairs, no longer the guilt-ridden grandson from this morning. His eyes were hard, focused, and there was something in his posture that made me take a step backward. "Where is it, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. "I know you have it. I found the photograph." The grandson I'd raised, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, was now standing in my destroyed basement, holding something behind his back. I could see the outline of it, another tool, maybe a hammer. "Tyler, what have you become?" I whispered. "What I had to become," he snapped. "Do you have any idea what my life is like? I'm drowning in debt, Grandpa. Student loans, credit cards, rent I can barely afford. And you're sitting on an 8 coin like it's some kind of trophy. How did you?" The documentation was all there in your desk. Authentication papers, insurance appraisals, bank records, a 1933 Double Eagle, verified authentic. His eyes gleamed with a desperate hunger I'd never seen before. "1 coin, Grandpa. 1 coin that could solve every problem in my life." I gripped the crowbar tighter, realizing with horror that I was afraid of my own grandson. "It's not just a coin, Tyler. It's history. It belongs in a museum, or with a collector who understands its significance. It belongs to someone who needs it." Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. "You're 65 years old, living in the same house for 40 years, driving a car that's older than I am. What do you need $18 million for?" The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. What did I need it for? The honest answer was that I didn't know. The coin had been my secret, my security blanket, proof that Sarah and I had built something valuable together, even if we'd never lived like rich people. "Where is it?" Tyler asked again, taking a step closer. "Even if I told you, you couldn't just walk into a bank and take it. Safety deposit boxes don't work that way." Tyler smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen on a family member's face. "They do when you have power of attorney papers." My blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "I've been staying here for 3 months, Grandpa. I know where you keep everything. Your legal documents, your will, your medical records." He pulled out a folder I recognized, my important papers file from the bedroom closet. It wasn't hard to forge a power of attorney document, and with your recent memory problems and confusion, well, the bank employees were very understanding. When I explained that I needed to help manage your affairs, the betrayal cut deeper than anything that had come before. This wasn't just theft anymore. Tyler had been systematically planning to steal my identity, my autonomy, my very existence as an independent human being. "You sick bastard," I breathed. "Tomorrow morning, I'm going to First National Bank. I'm going to present my power of attorney papers and access your safety deposit box. You can make this easy, or you can make it hard. But either way, that coin is going to solve my problems." I stared at this stranger wearing my grandson's face and felt something break inside me that would never heal. This wasn't desperation anymore. This was evil. What would you do in a situation like this, when someone you love betrays you so completely that they become unrecognizable? Would you fight back, or would you try to find some way to save them from themselves? I was about to make a choice that would change both of our lives forever. That night, after Tyler left with his threats hanging in the air like smoke, I sat in Sarah's recliner and did something I hadn't done since her funeral. I prayed. "Sarah, honey," I whispered to her photograph, "I need you to help me think this through. Our grandson has lost his way, and I don't know how to bring him back." But as the hours passed, something crystallized in my mind. Tyler thought he was dealing with a confused old man, someone whose memory was failing, whose judgment was compromised. He'd built his entire plan around that assumption. He was about to learn how wrong he was. At 6 a.m., I was dressed and ready. My first stop was First National Bank, where I'd been a customer for 37 years. Margaret Chen, the branch manager, greeted me with the warm smile she'd worn since starting there 15 years ago. "Mr. Anderson, how nice to see you. How can I help you today?" "Margaret, I need to access my safety deposit box, and then I need to make some changes to my account security." 20 minutes later, I walked out of that bank with the 1933 Double Eagle in my jacket pocket and a completely new banking arrangement. Tyler's forged power of attorney papers would be worthless now. I'd revoked any existing authorizations and set up new security protocols that required my physical presence and a password only I knew. But that was just the beginning of my plan. My second stop was the Cedar Rapids Police Department. Detective Maria Santos listened with growing amazement as I laid out Tyler's crimes: theft, fraud, forgery, breaking and entering, and attempted elderly abuse. "Mr. Anderson, this is serious stuff. Your grandson could be looking at 5 to 10 years if we can prove all this." "I can prove it," I said, pulling out my phone. "I recorded our conversation in the basement last night. The recording was clear, damning, and completely legal since it was my own property where the conversation took place." Tyler's voice came through the speaker, cold and calculating as he described his plan to use forged documents to steal my coin. "We can arrest him as soon as he tries to use those fake power of attorney papers," Detective Santos said. "No," I replied. "I want to give him one more chance to do the right thing." What I didn't tell the detective was that I had a much more elaborate plan in mind. Tyler thought he was playing chess with a confused old man. He was about to discover he'd been playing with someone who'd learned strategy from Sarah, the smartest woman who ever lived. By the time Tyler showed up at the bank the next morning, everything would be ready, and my grandson would learn that some lessons can only be taught the hard way. Tyler arrived at First National Bank at exactly 9:15 a.m., just as I knew he would. I watched from my car across the street as he walked through the front doors, carrying his briefcase with the forged documents and wearing his most charming smile. I'd positioned myself where I could see through the large windows into the main banking area. Margaret Chen was at her desk, and I watched as Tyler approached her with the confident stride of someone who thought he'd already won. The conversation lasted exactly 12 minutes. I could see Tyler's expression change as Margaret explained the new security protocols on my account. His charm faltered, then cracked completely as she informed him that all previous power of attorney authorizations had been revoked. By the time Detective Santos and Officer Rodriguez walked through the bank's front doors, Tyler's face had gone completely white. The arrest was quiet, professional, and devastating to watch. My grandson, Sarah's favorite grandchild, was handcuffed in the middle of the bank lobby, while other customers stared in shock. As they led him past the windows, Tyler's eyes found mine across the street. The look he gave me wasn't anger or hatred. It was something worse. The cold, dead stare of someone who'd finally realized he'd lost everything. I followed the police cars to the station, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Detective Santos met me in the parking lot, her expression sympathetic but firm. "Mr. Anderson, your grandson is looking at multiple felony charges. The evidence you provided, the recording, the forged documents, the theft, it's overwhelming. His public defender is already talking about a plea deal." "How long?" I asked. "Probably 3 to 5 years, with good behavior." 3 to 5 years. Tyler would be in his 30s when he got out, his whole future destroyed by his own greed and betrayal. As I drove home through the familiar streets of Cedar Rapids, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just a hollow emptiness where my family used to be. The story could have ended there, justice served, the criminal caught, the victim vindicated. But life isn't a courtroom drama, and real families don't heal with simple resolutions. That evening, I sat in Sarah's recliner holding the 1933 Double Eagle in my hands. The coin was beautiful, historically significant, worth more money than most people could imagine. But as I stared at it, all I could think about was the cost of protecting it. I'd saved an $18 million coin and lost my grandson forever. If you've been following this story, I want to ask you again to please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps me share these difficult, real stories about families and the choices we make. And please, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from. It means more than you know to connect with people from all over who understand these struggles. Tomorrow, I would have to make a decision about what came next, about whether justice was enough or whether there was still a chance for something that looked like redemption. 3 weeks later, I walked into the Lynn County Correctional Center carrying something I'd never thought I'd bring to a prison: forgiveness. Tyler sat across from me in the visiting room, looking smaller somehow in his orange jumpsuit. The charming smile was gone, replaced by hollow eyes and the kind of exhaustion that comes from finally understanding the weight of your own choices. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds coming from other inmates and their families, trying to rebuild connections across metal tables and broken trust. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Tyler finally whispered, his voice barely audible over the noise around us. "I know what I did was unforgivable." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000, money I'd raised by selling the 1933 Double Eagle to a private collector in Chicago. Not for $18 million, but for enough to change a young man's life if he used it wisely. "This is for your legal fees and to give you a fresh start when you get out," I said, sliding the envelope across the table. Tyler's eyes filled with tears as he stared at the check. "Grandpa, why would you, ... Because your grandmother Sarah loved you," I said, my own voice breaking. "And because I failed you somehow. I had all that time, all those years to teach you what really mattered. And instead, I taught you to value things that could be stolen. I destroyed everything," Tyler said, tears streaming down his face. "Our family, your collection, your trust, ... You destroyed things," I corrected him. "But family isn't a thing, Tyler. It's a choice we make every day. And I'm choosing to believe that the boy I taught to ride a bike is still in there somewhere, buried under all the mistakes and desperation." The visiting hour ended too soon, but as I stood to leave, Tyler grabbed my hand across the table. "I'll make this right, Grandpa. I swear to you, I'll spend the rest of my life making this right." I squeezed his hand back. "Just spend the rest of your life being the man your grandmother always believed you could be. That's enough." 6 months later, Tyler was released early for good behavior and enrolled in a community college program for addiction counseling. The money I'd given him went toward his education and to repay every person he'd wronged along the way. As for me, I still collect coins, not for their value anymore, but for their stories. And every evening I sit in Sarah's recliner and tell her about my day, about our grandson's progress, about the letters he sends me from school. The 1933 Double Eagle is gone, sold to fund a second chance for a young man who lost his way. But I kept one coin from my original collection, a wheat penny from 1943, worth maybe 50 cents to anyone else, but priceless to me. It's the first coin Tyler ever found as a child, digging in my backyard with Sarah's gardening spoon, convinced he'd discovered buried treasure. He had discovered treasure that day. It just took us 40 years and a destroyed basement to understand what kind. Some stories don't end with justice or revenge. Some stories end with grace and the hope that love can survive even the deepest betrayals. That's the story I choose to tell about my grandson Tyler, and that's the story I hope he'll tell about me someday. If this story has touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't worth anything at all except everything. Thank you for listening to my story. Leave a comment below and let me know what city you're listening from. I'd love to know that these words have traveled far from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and maybe helped someone else find their way back to what really matters.